The briefing room was relaxed in a way it rarely was. Helmets rested on tables, chairs were pulled slightly out of line, and conversation drifted away from operations into casual banter. Someone cracked a joke about combat stories getting exaggerated over time, and a few people laughed, relieved by the temporary break from seriousness. That was when the comment was made, tossed into the air without thought. One of the sailors, grinning, asked her about her kill count. The tone was playful, almost teasing, as if the question itself was the punchline. A few others chuckled, expecting her to roll her eyes or brush it off. To them, she didn't look like someone with a real answer. She was quiet, controlled, and never volunteered stories. In their minds, the question was harmless. She didn't laugh. She didn't react at all at first. She sat still, hands folded, eyes steady, as if she hadn't heard a joke, but a formal inquiry. The room kept smiling for a few seconds longer. Then the laughter began to fade when they realized she wasn't playing along. Even the senior personnel didn't intervene immediately. They assumed she would deflect, as most people did. Instead, she slowly lifted her gaze, scanning the room with calm professionalism. There was no anger in her expression, only focus. The shift was subtle but undeniable. Conversations stopped. Smiles tightened. What had been a careless joke now hovered awkwardly in the air. The room sensed it had crossed from humor into something else, something heavier. No one spoke. Everyone waited. And in that silence, it became clear that the question hadn't been harmless after all. She took a breath, not to steady herself, but to think. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. What had started as a joke now felt exposed, sitting uncomfortably between them. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. No one laughed anymore. She finally spoke, but not with an answer. Instead, she asked a single precise question, whether they were asking casually or within operational context. Her tone was calm, professional, and unmistakably serious. That alone changed everything. Jokes didn't come with clarifying questions. Real experience did. The room grew still. Faces that had worn smiles moments earlier now looked uncertain. Some avoided her eyes. Others watched closely, trying to understand what they had just triggered. Senior personnel straightened slightly, sensing the shift but not yet fully grasping it. She waited again, patient, disciplined, giving them time to respond. That pause carried more weight than any speech could have. It suggested rules, boundaries, and responsibility, things learned through experience. Not stories. In that moment, it became clear she wasn't offended. She wasn't defensive. She was treating the subject with the seriousness it demanded. The question had stopped being funny, and everyone in the room knew it. Whatever answer came next, it wouldn't be entertainment. It would be truth, delivered without drama, and they weren't sure they were ready to hear it. When she finally spoke, she didn't raise her voice or shift her posture. She simply answered. The number came out evenly, measured, without hesitation. No emphasis. No explanation attached to it at first. Just a figure, stated as if it were a line in a report. The effect was immediate. The room seemed to lose its air. A few people blinked, certain they had misheard. Others glanced instinctively toward command, searching for a reaction that might soften the moment. None came. The number wasn't exaggerated, but it was far beyond what anyone had expected. It wasn't the kind of figure someone joked about. It was the kind that only came from years of deployment, from missions that demanded precision and restraint. Not recklessness. She continued briefly, clarifying that the number was documented, confirmed and bound by rules of engagement. She didn't describe circumstances. She didn't tell stories. She didn't justify herself. She made it clear the count wasn't a badge of pride, but a responsibility carried forward. The silence that followed was absolute. No one smiled now. The joke had fully collapsed under the weight of reality. In that moment, everyone understood they hadn't been asking for a laugh. They had asked for a truth and received it without warning. The silence didn't break on its own. It was command that moved first. A senior officer slowly leaned forward, eyes no longer casual, no longer curious. The tone of the room shifted from stunned to disciplined in an instant. This was no longer an offhand conversation. It was official. Without raising his voice, the officer asked for clarification, not of the number, but of authorization. She responded immediately, citing operation types, joint task forces, and classification boundaries without crossing a single line. Her answers were precise, controlled, and unmistakably professional. She knew exactly what she could say and what she could not. That alone confirmed what many were beginning to realize. Another officer quietly accessed records. No announcements were made. No one needed to see the screen to understand what was happening. The subtle nod that followed was enough. The number matched. The deployments matched. The commendations, most of them restricted, filled in the gaps the room could not. There was no anger in command's reaction, only gravity. The joke that started it all wasn't addressed directly. It didn't need to be. The officers understood that the moment had already corrected itself. This wasn't about embarrassment. It was about respect for the weight of service and the cost behind every figure spoken aloud. One of them finally spoke, thanking her not for the answer, but for her restraint. She acknowledged it with a simple nod. The room remained quiet, but it was no longer awkward. It was attentive. Whatever followed would be taken seriously now. The briefing continued, but it was no longer the same room. Voices were measured now, questions deliberate, humor carefully set aside. What had begun as casual conversation had reshaped the tone of everyone present. No one needed to be told what had gone wrong. They felt it. The weight of the moment lingered in every pause, every glance exchanged across the table. She returned to listening, posture relaxed but alert, as if nothing unusual had happened. There was no victory in her expression, no satisfaction in having shocked anyone. If anything, she seemed relieved that the moment was over. For her, the answer had never been about proving anything. It had been about honesty and responsibility, nothing more. When the briefing ended, people filed out quietly. A few offered brief nods as they passed her, gestures small but sincere. One sailor stopped and apologized, not loudly, not publicly, just enough to be heard. She accepted it without comment. That was all that was needed. Respect didn't require explanation. Later, one of the senior officers reflected aloud that numbers like those were never meant for jokes. They represented decisions made under pressure, lives altered forever, and burdens carried long after the mission ended. The lesson settled deeply among those who heard it. Combat experience wasn't entertainment. It wasn't a story to be teased out of someone for laughs. It was something earned at great cost. As she left the room, the base returned to its normal rhythm. But something had changed. The people who had laughed now understood the difference between curiosity and carelessness. The joke hadn't just turned serious. It had revealed a truth the Navy never forgot: some service is carried quietly, and those who bear it deserve silence, not questions, unless they choose to speak.